Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. This is a video PowerPoint over Chapter 3, Section 1, and we're going to go ahead and finish up the Southern colonies. All right, what factors influence the development of the Southern colonies? You have Maryland, Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia. These are all Southern colonies. We spoke and talked about Virginia a few weeks back. Factors that influence the development of these colonies include the climate, the plantation system, religion, and relations with natives. So the South is going to be different than the Middle and the New England or Northern colonies. The geography of the Southern colonies. Again, these are located south of the Mason-Dixon line. This is a boundary drawn between Pennsylvania and Maryland. So Maryland is going to be the northernmost Southern colony. After the American Revolution, the Mason-Dixon line was the dividing line between anti-slave and pro-slavery states. The Southern colonies share a coastal area called the Tidewater, a flat lowland that includes many swampy areas. On its west, the Tidewater blends into a region of rolling hills called the Piedmont. We're going to spend some time shortly. You're going to look at a map activity. You're going to see the Tidewater region. You're also going to see the Piedmont. There's a lot of fighting that's going to occur over this particular land. We'll talk more about that in a second or two. Then and now, the climate of the southern states is warm and humid. These states have a long growing season, perfect for crops such as tobacco and rice. So if you look here on the map, the key, again, this area here that I'm showing with the pointer, this is all the Tidewater region. It's lowland. Okay, it's perfect for growing rice. And again, the further inland you go, again, you're going to see that tobacco is abundant. This is because of the growing season in the south. This is very unlike New England, in which the summers were cool, the soil was rocky, it wasn't conducive for great farming. England's southern colonies, like its other colonies, were founded for various religious and political reasons, some for economic opportunities. So if you look at the chart here, we see that Jamestown was founded, John Smith, an early leader, again, for trade and farming. This is from the Virginia Company of London. Again, this was a joint stock company designed to make a profit. Maryland is going to go in as a religious and political colony. The Carolinas are for, like Virginia, for trade and farming. Georgia is going to go in as a home for debtors and as a buffer against Spanish Florida. We'll talk about that in a minute. Virginia's population grew gradually. By 1670, 40,000 people lived there. By the 1670s, there were more women in Virginia and more children as well because fewer were dying at a young age. In other words, the early years where everybody died initially, again, that's changing. The native population is also shrinking, though, because of conflicts and tensions with the English. By 1607, there had been about 8,000 natives in Virginia, but ultimately disease and violence are going to take their toll. Again, you could look by 1675, only 2,000 or so natives were left. Between 1622 and 1644, violence breaks out between farmers who want more space to plant tobacco and natives who are defending their land. So this is a source of tension, also shows a source of weak leadership. If we remember, the instructions to the Virginia colony were to make peace with the natives. Bacon's Rebellion. You're going to read about this in our textbook. Again, Bacon's Rebellion was over many things. It was over land and voting rights. Okay, poor young white men couldn't get farmland near the coast. It was all bought up. They were frustrated. Remember, at this time period, if you didn't have land, you couldn't vote. So it was very easy to get shut out of the whole political process in the New World. And again, many colonists move inland to find the good farmland, but thus you get stuck dealing with natives. The colonists want the governor to force natives to relinquish and sell land. However, the governor will not do this, didn't want to disrupt any kind of trade. So the sentiment was that amongst the poor people, that the government was only there for the wealthy. So there was a lot of discontent and anger. So Bacon organizes 1,000 settlers. They go and fight. The natives, by the way, this also were attacking the settlers. They took matters into their own hands. Virginia's governor declares the settlers rebels. Bacon ends up burning Jamestown. So this is serious stuff. The rebellion collapses when Bacon dies. But again, people are headed away from that tidewater. Again, they're headed toward the Piedmont, and again, they want to get, in a sense, before the fall line. Now, we're going to do a map activity in class. It's going to better explain what I mean by a fall line. But there's a lot of fighting over land here. In 1632, King Charles I, he grants a charter for a new colony to George Calvert, an English Catholic. Calvert sets up the colony of Maryland, where Catholics could live free of the persecution they suffered in England. Remember, England at this time is a Protestant country. France is a Catholic country. So countries were not just known by their politics, they're also known by their religious persuasions. The first settlers in Maryland were both Catholics and Protestants. When Calvert died, his son, Lord Baltimore, becomes proprietor. Remember, that's an owner of the colony. There's tension between Protestants and Catholics. Again, Lord Baltimore is fearing that Catholics might lose their political rights, so he passes the Act of Toleration. And this welcomed all Christians and gave adult male Christians the right to vote and hold office. So this would be on the same wavelength that William Penn did in Pennsylvania, Roger Williams in Rhode Island. Again, there's definitely a push for religious tolerance here. Moving on to the Carolinas. The Carolinas were granted, King Charles II granted a charter for a new colony, originally just called Carolina, that was south of Virginia. The northern part of Carolina developed slowly. There weren't any harbors or rivers. A lot of tobacco grown there. Southern Carolina expanded a lot faster. Planters came all the way from the Indies. Again, they were bringing slaves to grow sugar and rice. This was an important crop, especially in that low-lying area, the Tidewater region. As rice production spread, Carolina's main city, Charlestown, okay, we call it Charleston today, became the biggest city in the southern colonies. By the way, the town was named Charleston after the American Revolution. As a snub to the English, we literally changed the names of English towns. But Charleston's a huge city in the south. Eventually, Carolina would become two colonies, north and south. And then finally, Georgia, the last of England's 13 colonies, was founded for a couple reasons. The English colony south of Carolina would confine the Spanish to their Florida colony. There was problems. The Spanish, along with natives, would just go north and attack South Carolina. England didn't like that, so they wanted to create a buffer colony. And again, that way, protect South Carolina at all costs. Okay, well, who do you get to populate Georgia? Well, James Oglethorpe, he's a wealthy Englishman. He wants a colony where there would be protection for English debtors. So these are people that owed money. They were put in prison. They couldn't pay their debts. You don't get out of prison until you pay your debts. Originally, Georgia's founders wanted Georgia to be a colony of small farms, not large plantations. And again, slavery was banned. Remember, slavery was primarily in the South, and it was on large plantations for agriculture, whether it be rice cultivation, tobacco farming. James Oglethorpe was against slavery, and he wanted just small farms. This restriction was unpopular with settlers. It didn't last long. And again, by 100 some years later, slavery would be legal in Georgia. During the 1700s, southern colonies developed two distinct ways of life. You've got the backcountry life and plantation life. The backcountry was cut off from the coast. Many poor families lived there, one-room shacks, isolated farms. Again, very, very poor. Plantation life was along the coast, the Tidewater region. Again, you had wealthy plantations. These could be 1,000-acre plantations. They were almost mini cities. So there was quite a discrepancy between the rich and the poor in the South. The plantation system began in Virginia and Maryland when settlers began growing tobacco. The Tidewater region in South Carolina and Georgia was well suited for rice, so these are the big cash crops in the area. Rice growing required many workers to labor in unpleasant conditions. This was one reason rice farming helped promote the spread of slavery. In time, the enslaved populated outnumbered the free population of South Carolina. So you begin to have a racial divide in the South as well. The plantation system divided the white community into a small group of wealthy people, and then again a much larger group of poor people with little or no property in the back country. The back country was cut off from the coast by poor roads and long distances. Families lived on isolated farms and shacks, often on land not legally their own. They'd be tenant farmers. They would work land for somebody else. Backcountry people believed colonial governments on the coast cared only about the interests of plantation owners, not about them. So a lot of this ties into Bacon's rebellion and the anger that poor colonists felt about the government. It's fair to say that in the colonies, not everybody's on the same page. Not everybody believes in equal rights. All these things have yet to be worked out. Thanks for listening. Feel free to refer back to, should you need to.